Well, good morning if you are somewhere along the Pacific Ocean. Good afternoon if you're in New York City or somewhere along the American shores of the Atlantic Ocean. Good early evening in parts of Europe. And guten Abend in Vienna, where my guest joins me today, Peter Hosek. He calls himself Peter as well. And greetings to people all around the world. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. As I mentioned, my guest today, which is October 25th of 2024, is Peter Hosek. Which one do you prefer, Peter or Peter?
Well, both are fine as long as you mean me, because my father's name was also Peter Hosek. So that's also something that I have in common with the topic of today's conversation, the name.
Who is Johann Strauss. So let's get right to that. Today is the 199th anniversary of the birth of Johann Strauss Jr. or Johann Strauss II. Which one is he? Or both?
Well, in German, we call him Johann Strauss Sohn, which is the son. So I'm not sure if there's any wrong as long as you say Johann Strauss in something, because there are two very famous composers with the same name, Johann Strauss. So there is the father. That's why we say Johann Strauss father and Johann Strauss son. If you say first or second, it's fine. If you say senior and junior, also fine. There's an interesting letter that I think Anna Streim, his mother, Johann's mother, wrote once, and she wrote that she wants to make him to Johann Strauss the only one, because she was not happy with the way the father dealt with the talent of his son, as you might know. And so that's why I think all these versions are quite okay.
Well, I want to get into exactly that in one moment, but first tell our audience around the world who you are.
Well, Peter Hosek, I was a musician. I studied music for a long time. I was a clarinet player. My teacher was one of the probably most gifted, talented clarinet players in the world. He was the principal clarinet player of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. His name was Alfred Prinz. He also taught in the States, in Bloomington, for many, many years. Passed away, I think, 10 years ago, unfortunately, in his mid-80s. And I was studying with him and learned a lot through that. And then when I graduated in the university and had my diploma, I decided to change the sides, let's call it like that, and be more a producer and promoter of concerts than an actual artist, because I was talented, but I was a little lazy, maybe. That's the reason. So I decided to change, and then I started to produce concerts. And, as a private person, when you produce shows, you don't get subsidies because you're not important enough. So you have to do things on a commercial base. So we decided to find a market which we are comfortable with, and we found out that the poor tourists coming to Vienna in July and August in the mid-90s, early 90s, just don't get the shows or the concerts or the experience in the summertime that they're expecting, because the opera is closed, the Musikverein was closed. Philharmonic Orchestra in Salzburg, Symphony Orchestra in Bregenz at the festivals. So there was nothing going on in July and August, especially these days. And that's when I started my company in 1994 with these kind of concerts to cover those needs. And of course, what you do when you are a commercial producer, you just play the music that the audience wants to hear, which was the music of Johann Strauss. And that's when I started to produce concerts when I was 24 in 1994. So that makes it easy now to find out how old I am. So I'm turning... couple months, I'm turning 55. So all my life as a musician and now as a producer is just around the topic of Johann Strauss. And then, of course, the orchestra developed. We got a contract in Schönbrunn Palace, which is the summer palace of the emperors, the old days. And there we rent a venue, and there we perform concerts every single day. And I said, this is not enough. I need to do more, because doing concerts for tourism is nice to make some money, but you of course have some kind of higher approach to other things. So I decided to tour the orchestra, the Schönbrunn Palace Orchestra. Since 22 years, I think, we're touring now the world. So we were everywhere, basically, except in Australia. But we've been to South America, North America. We've been to all over Europe, Asia, and Africa. Even last year, we went to Africa the first time, which was a really interesting experience, performing in Kruger Park in front of hippos and 650 rangers protecting us. This was quite a success. Yeah, this is my past. I mean, besides that, I had an event company, a catering company. I was running a hotel, which I thought I need to run a hotel. But this is not nothing compared to what I'm doing now, because this is my how you call it? It's meant to be that I'm doing what I do. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, and now,
what's the name of your company?
Well, I have 5 companies now, and so the one part is doing the concerts, which is called the WKE, which is the Wiener Konzert and Event organization, where we're doing all the concerts in Schönbrunn with the creative exhibitions. We're doing exhibitions. So we are producing an exhibition now for the anniversary year of 2025 of the Johann Strauss anniversary year, and which will open actually not far from now in 2 weeks' time. We're opening this exhibition on the 5th of November. So everybody comes to Vienna should see that, because it's a completely new approach to an exhibition. It's a digital exhibition. It's a silent exhibition where you walk through with the headphones and have the music and, of course, the voiceover to the life of Johann Strauss. Quite interesting. Yes, so that's my background. But what comes in the first place is, of course, the music. And this is always in the first place. Should be.
And you are Viennese in birth and origin?
Born and raised in Vienna, correct.
Franz Schubert.
Well, yeah, but a different district. I actually born in the 17th district.
I know the 17th.
Also an interesting story. I grew up in the house, not in the apartment, but in the same house where the brothers Schrammel, I'm sure you heard about the Schrammel music, which is the original Viennese kind of chamber music that they played in the countryside with this very small clarinet, the G clarinet. Yeah. In this house where they lived, I grew up. Yeah, so that's
so for listeners who don't know Vienna, if you know Paris has what are called arrondissements, which are neighborhoods or districts, and in Vienna they're called a Bezirk.
Bezirk, correct.
Bezirk, and in New York they're called real estate districts. If you give it a better name, the price of the rent goes up. But administratively in Vienna, like Paris, each Bezirk has its own functioning, its own administration, and so on. And if you say I live in the 9th, you might think of Dr. Freud. If I live in the 1st, you might think of the Historic Center. If you live in the 4th, you think of the food markets and things like that. We have only just met, Peter, so you don't know that I have an immense passion for Vienna, and I've spent a lot of time there. I've worked there. I first went there as a 19-year-old and absolutely adored it, and was living in Europe. I was not a tourist from America, so went back very, very often, and it became a part of my life. And it's a city, it's a complex city. It's one I genuinely adore. It reminds me very much of my native city of New York City, because it's said that New York, Buenos Aires, and Vienna, more people use psychiatrists and psychologists than any other city in the world.
That's very, very true. You know, the soul of a real Viennese is a very, very difficult thing to explain, because we are kind of many different personalities. It depends what you're talking about. We can be the happiest person, and in the second after that, we are like very not sad. I wouldn't call it sad. It's more. You know
Peter,
this.
I'm going to stop you because we had a little freeze of the internet,
Oh,
maybe not on your side. So you began to talk about the different personalities or aspect of personality of the Viennese.
yes. Well, the different personalities of Viennese, yeah, they're always a little whining about things, but they don't really mean it, but they say it anyway. Or when you go to a coffee house, the waiters they seem unfriendly, but they're not unfriendly. They're just the way they are, because they don't want to get rushed, and it's this kind of very gemütlich, you would say, which is comfortable with. They don't want to get rushed. It's just easy. We always say we don't do things the fast way. We do it the Viennese way because we are. I always say when people in Asia, especially, say, "Well, Peter, I need this now." I said, "No, no, no, no. We're from Vienna. We do it the slower way, and then they laugh. So it's something that you can play with and you should play with because it's kind of charming too.
I grew up on the Upper West Side of New York City, and West 72nd Street, when I was a boy, was all Viennese. It's where people
Really.
from before World War II, during and after World War II, if they were Viennese, they went and lived on or near West 72nd Street. And I lived on 66th and then 70th Street. So I knew many Viennese people when I was a kid. And there were conditorei, there were pastry shops and Viennese cafes all along West 72nd Street. And I got to know their senses of humor. I would sit and talk to them about music. And I met a woman who told me that she played tennis with Richard Strauss. I never knew whether to believe her or not because I think a
But
lot
it's
of
very
people
possible. I mean,
told, I never knew that he played tennis. This is Richard, not Johann.
yeah,
And
I understand. But still, I didn't know that either. But it's still a very, even if the story is not correct or not, it's just a good way to come into a conversation
yeah,
about it. They like to talk about everything, and they have an opinion about everything. Maybe
that's true.
you don't agree with what they say, but they like to talk about this and that. And when you mention New York, I mean, I'm sure you heard about Mr. Leopoldi, Hermann Leopoldi,
Hmm.
the composer of Viennese songs. He was very famous in New York because he had his own tavern, the Viennese tavern, and he played there many years after the war. During the war, he immigrated and left the country because of the war, and then he was quite successful in New York and came back and performed in Vienna until he passed. So that was quite an amazing story too.
What
And
was interesting here is that the Germans moved to East 86th Street. The Viennese moved to West 72nd Street.
interesting.
And they
Is
would
there a
not,
reason?
they had separate communities.
Okay.
And when I went to East 86th Street, it felt much more German than Austrian. When I went to West 72nd Street, which is near my home, I think that I experienced that so much because a sense of humor is a very difficult thing to understand and translate. I've read Dr. Freud on humor, and it's not very funny because he was very clinical. Um, but I do find that for the most part, Viennese people and New Yorkers, not Americans, but New Yorkers, have a similar sense of humor. And what's funny in Vienna is funny in New York most of the time, though not always.
Absolutely. And there's another city in the world which is similar, like New York and Vienna, because the New Yorkers and the Viennese, like you said, they are very similar. It's the Berlin. The people in Berlin
Yeah.
are also very special in the country of Germany. And also the Berlinese and the Viennese, they are very alike. And I had a company there in Berlin, and I ran for 10 years a show or a concert hall there. So I can tell. Didn't do that in New York yet, but who knows? Maybe it will happen one day that I'm
Well,
doing something
New
there.
York is a very open, very diverse city. Um, Berlin, historically, and that's another city I know very well, have worked in a lot, um, to me has a different flavor from Vienna.
True.
Berlin is a little more upfront, a little more, although Vienna artistically certainly has been risk taking through the years. The feeling in Vienna is more traditional, even though the Viennese have always been experimenters and have been path breakers on new kinds of art and design and ways of writing the musical scale and ways of designing clothing and buildings and furniture and everything. But the
Mhm.
difference I find between Berlin and Vienna is Berlin is the capital of a very large country that expanded on occasion, whereas Vienna was the capital of a very large empire that actively brought in different languages and foods and flavors and personalities,
Mhm.
extending from the North Sea, extending to the Adriatic, extending to the Black Sea. When I talk about the musical, The Sound of Music, and people say the Austrian Navy, how does Salzburg have a navy? Well, it's because it's Trieste. It might be the Black Sea in the past, and so on. And that Austria was bigger. Austria was not necessarily geographically bigger, but more open to ideas and flavors and traditions and sounds. And you hear it all the time in Austrian music that,
Absolutely,
whether
absolutely.
it's Mahler or just about anyone, the
Anyone. I mean,
music reflects not just the Viennese sound like Schubert, but reflects the sound of every other place that was part of the Austrian and later the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
that's very true, and that's how the whole thing started in the. We'll come back to our topic of Johann Strauss. When you look back at his grandfather, I don't know if you know the story, but he was having a small. It was not a restaurant; it was like a tavern on the river, not the Danube.
Beisel?
It was not even a Beisel. It was less than a Beisel. It was a small place where all the people that brought in wood from the northern stream of the Danube, and they
Yep.
brought it into Vienna. And these people came from all over Europe. So they all played and sang their national songs in this tavern of
Hmm.
John's son's grandfather, and Franz Strauss. And and he passed. You know how he passed?
No.
He drowned in the Danube. Can you imagine what tragic? He drowned because he had so much depth that he actually they think that he killed himself. So the Blue Danube is not only a beautiful waltz; it's also a historic kind of connection to his family with his grandfather. So that's
And the
quite
Danube is not blue, by the way.
well. No, if Spike Jones, he said the Danube is green. So there is this one funny piece from I think from the 40s or 30s, 40s. This Spike Jones with his slapstick comedy show. He had a song, "The Danube is green," green like a bean. I was watching it once, quite funny. But no, the Danube is of course not blue. And the funny thing is, the text to the Blue Danube Waltz was written years, tenth of years after the original was performed, which was not a big success actually in 1867 when he performed it at one of those balls in Vienna. It was not very successful. It became much more successful after that when he went to Paris to the World Exhibition to perform it there with the orchestra, just without the choir, no text, just the music.
So I want to kind of get into many topics here,
Sure.
but I spent a lot of time in Italy, and a lot of my work is in Italy. And there are certain cities, but especially Naples, where the music of Naples is identified with the personality of the people, the sound of the people. Um, Inimitably, Neapolitan music, if it's done by people elsewhere, let's say Pavarotti or Jose Carreras, who speak beautiful Italian, nonetheless, they're missing just that little Neapolitan element that it sounds like they're performing in another language, whereas Neapolitans, Caruso would have sung it in his native Neapolitan. Similarly, once you go beyond the last Bazilica, Vienna, and you're in the Vienna woods, and then you're going to Upper Austria or Lower Austria or Styria, Steiermark, um, things change. And the Viennese-ness of the music of Johann Strauss, more, I think, than any other composer, feels like if to me, like a calling card, like it's a representation of a culture that is experienced differently by the local people than it can be by people such as myself who love Vienna, but I'm not Viennese.
I make I make a big difference between people that know the history of Vienna and love it like you do because you don't not now live there, or you didn't study there as a musician, for example, being from abroad, but living in the city and in inhaling all this beautifulness of the buildings, of the food, and of the atmosphere, of the woods, like you mentioned, and between people that just like to play the music, because everybody in the world likes to play a piece of Johann Strauss. And when you go anywhere in the world, doesn't matter where, then the tradition how to play this music and the expanding between the bars when you go from waltz 1 to waltz 2 or to other places, this expanding and the downbeats, I don't, do you call it downbeats, what the
Yeah,
second violins are
downbeat.
down, there's not one single bar where the two quarters of the bar, the 2 and the 3 are the same. It does not happen because it goes with the melody. If you don't know the melody, you can anticipate how to play those downbeats. And this is something that you only learn in this city by someone that knows it, or that got the tradition from his teacher and from their teacher and so on. So I think it doesn't matter where you come from. When you live in Vienna, and I have musicians in my orchestra coming from everywhere in the world, literally everywhere, and they now play this music the way that where I just so proud of them because they all are one part, you know, they all know how to do these downbeats and they know how to adjust to the melodies, and this is something which I think is so amazing that it can work. And you know, the first approach I always tell them, because they say, how do you do this? The second quarter of the bar comes on in the waltzes, comes always a little bit early, and the third one a little bit late. And that's how we call it the swinging waltz. That's how the waltz starts swinging, because it's not exact 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You know, it's a little bit early. So why? I said, well, then think about where the waltz is coming from. It's coming from the dance. It's coming from the turning. So when you turn, of course, fast. The first step is fast because you only have to walk to the side, and then you have to turn the whole body. So the second quarter, because the first is the first to stand anyway, and then you turn one quarter, and then you have to turn the whole body. That's why the second step in this whole dancing is a little early, and then you have to turn your whole body, and the third is a little bit too late. And that's what Johann Strauss and the dancers back then and all the other composers, they realized it. And that's why if you want to put this into the music, of course it cannot be put in a rule, because there's no rule. The rule goes with the melody. The rule, if the melody is how to say it's waltzes have different sections. They have the sections where it's very rhythmical, then it's a very nice melody, kind of in the air. And I think this is something that you really need to study. You need to study the whole score, not only the melodies, or you need to understand how Johann Strauss put together his score. And he always started with the melody because it was the most important. Then he wrote the bass line. And then when he had time, he did the orchestration himself. But usually he gave it to his orchestra members. Say, just do it. And then set together, put it together, and played. In the early days. In the later days, of course, he was scoring everything himself, especially when he wrote the operettas. But all the dance music before had to go fast. And he wanted to produce fast. And that's how he was able to produce fast, especially in the 60s, the 1860s, where he produced a lot.
So you and I are saying things to each other, I think, with a level of understanding that I would like to bring in our listeners who may not know by nature, what you and I are talking about. So Vienna, the Austrian Empire, the Habsburgs, were the ruling family of Vienna and beyond, places across the empire. Vienna was the administrative capital, it was the cultural capital. It was where genius arrived from every direction. It was a city that had its traditions. In terms of the food, it was wonderful food. But what I always love about, I've written a book about Habsburg food, is that the emperors would eat the food of the middle classes. They didn't, like in France or Russia, eat very fancy, elaborate food that no one else could get. And people identified with the ruling families often in Vienna because if you had a Tafelspitz, he would have a Tafelspitz. In other
Very
words, which is boiled beef with spinach and it's a soup. It's wonderful. But similarly, the same cakes, the same coffees, and so on, because it was very good, but it also gave a sense of adhesion and inclusion. Now, what was a big part of Vienna then and still now is what's known as ball season, which is usually in the winter, in which night after night after night, it seems, another institution, whether it's the baker, I think it's called the sugar ball, the baker's ball, the firefighters ball, of course, the opera ball. But there are many balls held in Vienna, which are these big dance events and held in different venues with different food. And was Johann Strauss at a certain point, in effect, the music director of all the balls?
Yes, he was. He was the director. He became the KMK, which is the Kaiserlich Königlich, which is the short form for the emperor back then, which was basically the emperor of Austria and the king of Hungary. So this was the same person, the emperor, and Johann Strauss became in 1863. He became the second Hofmusikkapellmeister, which was a big title, and he was supposed to do all the balls on court. But he was before that, he wanted to get this title so bad because his father, Johann Strauss' father, he was had his title until he passed in 1849. Which of course Johann, so the son thought he will get the title right after that, but he had to wait quite a long time because the emperor was not happy with the position of Johann Strauss, the son, in the revolution in 1848. Because Johann
And I
Strauss.
do want to get to that. I'm going to put that on the shelf for a
Okay.
moment, but let's stick to the balls for right now.
The ball, yeah. Then he became the Hofmusikkapellmeister, which he gave him a uniform, a special title. And some years later, he stepped out of that. I think it was in 1871, I think, or 70, 71, 72, something around that. I'm not 100% sure. Sorry for that. I should know, but I just forgot about it. And then he gave it to his. They gave it to his brother, to his youngest brother, Eduard, and he took over. And because he had to compose the operettas, and he was supposed to do all the balls at court in the Hofburg, which is the winter palace of the emperor in the city center. And he did all these duties and was quite successful with that. Before that, he was of course not the official title, but he was also the beloved star, let's call it star, of the Viennese audiences.
So the reason I opened that topic about the balls is the following. Did Johann Strauss, the son, and maybe other waltz composers compose music for dancing, or did they compose music as music? In other words, if I were to nowadays create music for dancing, I might know specifically it's for a dance, whereas other kinds of music might be for listening. Did he compose dance music or listening music?
Definitely for dance music in the early days. Definitely until he started to write for the stages, for the operettas. Definitely for dancing, because this is where he came from. This is where he grew up with. This is that's what he heard from his father all the time. This is what made him big. So of course it was dance music. But then later on, the late works from the, let's say, 370, 380 until the end, was more the listening thing. And when you remember the concerts that the Strauss family did, the Promenade concert at Musikverein, where they started to do the Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon concerts, the Promenade concerts. Eduard Strauss was mostly conducting those and arranging whatever Johann Strauss wrote. When he wrote his operettas, he always had they always reused the music in the concerts and then put it together as an operetta. Then I think he started to write pieces which we call concert waltzes, concert pieces, and these were not for dancing, they were for listening. Like Seit umschlungen Millionen, for example, is one of those examples where you cannot dance because it's too much art to be danceable. And when you look back in the first waltzes, certainly it was dance music. When you read about his very first concert on the 15th of October, actually 10 days ago was his anniversary, 1844, very first concert at the Domeyer Casino. It was supposed to be a dance soiree, which says it on the invitation. So the dance event, but they couldn't dance because there's so many people, because everybody wanted to see what this young guy, not even 19 years old, is going to do. And that's why 100% sure dance music. But
so therefore,
sorry, I wanted to add something, but he was not a dancer. I'm sure you know. He was not a dancer. He did never dance. He called his he had a Diener. What is a Diener? Servant.
The servant. Yeah.
In the later days, he joined him also to America in the later days, and he made him dance with the ladies that wanted to dance with Johann Strauss. He said, "No, I'm not dancing."
It's like Leporello and Don Giovanni.
Yeah, something like that. Absolutely correct. So it is. That's quite a funny, coincidence. No, he was not a dancer.
So
not at all.
When I went to graduate school, I did my undergraduate, most of my training in Europe, but I went to grad school for a year here in New York City at Columbia University. And I had a classmate who was from Vienna. We became very good friends. And his name was Michael. And Michael grew up in Vienna and learned dancing. He went to all the balls as a young man. Part of his upbringing and his culture was to know all those dances. And it's not that he was different. All the boys that he grew up with had to learn this stuff and would go to the balls and would escort young women and so forth and wear white gloves and beautiful clothing. And I once asked him, he's not a dancer, he went into finance, but I asked him whether when he hears the music of Strauss and other waltzes, does he hear dancing? And he said, well, I'm not a musician, but I know how to move based on what I hear in the music. And that always stuck with me. And that was the basis of my question that I asked you before, because you don't have to be a musician to understand how you turn. You so beautifully explained how the music differs from one measure, one bar to another, based on the musical intention and the dance intention.
Absolutely. And for example, a waltz has a structure. Yeah. So in the old days, it was 5 waltzes and an introduction and a coda and ending. So the introduction was important to give the people they listened and to give them the sign, oh, listen, there will something happen. Come on the dance floor. People come on the dance floor, and then the waltz, the tempo di valse, in the music it says tempo di valse, it starts the waltz rhythm, and then you start the dancing. And the first waltz was always the topic, theme, the biggest idea, and the second one was a little bit more into the melody, a little bit, not every waltz, but most of the waltzes are a little softer. Third one is usually a little bit more rhythmically, and the 4 and the 5 are boom, they are going to shoot and turning and going a little faster. And then in the coda, he mixes all these topics together, and then it's the end. So that's, you cannot invent something. Can you imagine this just happened? because there was nobody planning it. It
Hmm.
just happened. And this is what I've called the genius of Johann Strauss, to understand what the people that wanted to listen to his music and dance to his music, what they wanted to do and to hear. And then it was not just a normal melody. It was just a very, very, very special melodies, which we still have today, 200 years after, almost 200 years after his birth, and 180 years after his first concert. And it's just always breathtaking when I listen to also the early works. A lot of people say, this all sounds the same. I just had a big discussion today. No, it does not sound the same. It is very, very different. Yeah, maybe it's a three-quarter. Of course, a waltz is in a three-quarter, and the polkas in two, and the polka mazurkas in three as well, a little slower. But nobody would come to the idea to say, well, Brahms symphony, they all sound the same. Nobody would ever say that. So,
Oh, yes, they would.
well, you would, well, me too. But, but you mean what you understand what I mean? This
Yeah.
is something that I think it's a very, very making him not. It's not fair to the music, and Johann Strauss music still considered to be like a second class music in a lot
Yeah.
of the parts of it. But I can tell you why. Very easy. You cannot, in anywhere in the world, you cannot program a Strauss program for a local orchestra. Can you imagine the New York Philharmonic is a brilliant orchestra, probably one of the best in the world, but not for this kind of music. They play they play probably Donauwalzer, the Blue Danube, and the Emperor's Waltz and the polkas. But when it comes to something that they probably never played or that's not their repertoire, it's very difficult. They can play excellent Mahler, maybe because Bernstein taught him how to play Mahler.
I'll tell you why after.
Uh,
I'll tell you why. Yeah.
okay, now that's very, very interesting. So I think, yeah, sorry, I didn't want to.
That's all right.
Now.
I was talking before about how Vienna and New York are very bonded. Another way that they're bonded is that both of our major orchestras were founded in 1842.
Mm-hmm.
And they always, even when there was not internet, not telephone, not recordings, they knew what the other one was doing. And even though Vienna and New York were quite distant when you had to travel across the European continent to get to a French or British port, to then get on a ship, to then get to New York, that took a long time. Nonetheless, it happened. And composers from the empire, which might include Dvorak, who we don't think of as being part of the Austrian Empire, but he was.
He was part.
Dvorak spent a great deal of time here in New York. Similarly, Gustav Mahler, who was from Bohemia originally, if I'm correct, in his early years worked a lot at the Vienna Philharmonic. But he had a falling out for many reasons with the Vienna Philharmonic, and he was invited by the New York Philharmonic and the Metropolitan Opera to work here in New York. So he would spend 9 months of the year in New York City and taught his ways, his music making ways, both to the Met Orchestra and the New York Philharmonic. Many of his scores that he created in his lifetime, he died in 1911, if I remember, are here with his notations in the archive of the New York Philharmonic, and then further notations by Leonard Bernstein and others. But we have a very strong Mahler tradition here. Typically now, recently and back in June, the music director of the Philharmonic, Jaap van Zweden, left as music director. He played the Mahler Second Symphony as his farewell. And Mahler is very much part of our musical DNA here in New York. And so is Dvorak, because he lived and worked here and taught here.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Strauss to some degree, Tchaikovsky in a small way, Igor Stravinsky, absolutely. Bela Bartok lived down the street from Carnegie Hall. So those composers who came here, or in many cases Los Angeles, left their musical DNA. Arnold Schoenberg went to Los Angeles, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and they left all of their ideas and their ways and they trained musicians who further trained other musicians and so on down the line. So that's why I would claim that Mahler is also a New York composer, because he would work here and conduct here for 9 months, and then get back on a ship, go to somewhere in the Austrian Alps, or what are now the Italian Alps, but Toblach, Dobbiaco for his latter part of his life. Before that, Wörthersee, which is Klagenfurt, that area, and before that near Salzburg. And every summer in a composer hut, he would compose his music. The early music, I would say, is much more pastoral, much more Austrian. The later music reflects, I think, his worldview, his Weltschmerz that he felt living in New York and experiencing the world and having his emotional and psychological problems. And it's very interesting the way he straddled both New York and Austria, and how he felt connected to both, but not connected to either completely. Before we get back to Johann Strauss, since we're in the land of Mahler, I want to ask you about Richard Strauss, because Richard Strauss, to many people, is actually the waltz king. I'm not saying, for me, he's not, but he created such beautiful facsimiles, I'm going to call them, of other kinds of music, whether it was Mozartian, whether it was Wagnerian, whether it was Johann Straussian. He had this remarkable ability to make his own unique sound, Richard Strauss, but evoking the sound of others. And most famously in Der Rosenkavalier, which he was Bavarian, but it was the libretto is by Hofmannsthal, is set in Vienna. It's spoken in Viennese dialect to a large degree. And where do you think Richard Strauss stands on the whole topic of real waltzing and the real Viennese, echte Wiener?
Well, Richard Strauss, not being an Austrian and not Viennese, certainly not related to the Strauss brothers, was a composer much, much later than Johann Strauss. So I think that the waltzes developed into an art form, in a different art form. Also, when you look at Franz Lehár or at Emmerich Kallmann in the operetta, but in Richard Strauss, when you mentioned the Rosenkavalier, the breakfast scene with this beautiful waltz that he actually picked the melody from Joseph Strauss, from the Lyrian, I think it's the Lyrian waltz, or Dynamiten, I'm not sure, one of those, I always mix them up. One of those, the melody, that's a Joseph Strauss waltz, that's the son.
Ohne mich, is that the word? Ohne mich, ohne mich, ohne mich. I think it's the word he sings.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't prepare for Richard Strauss.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I'm sure that I think the music that Richard Strauss wrote is very complex music and fantastic music. But to call him a waltz king, I would call him the opera king. Yes, okay. because well, but then you have a Mozart and you have all these other beautiful composers of operas, and Beethoven and with Fidelio. I mean, this is a wonderful opera too, which I think it's an enormous piece. But when you come to the 20th century, I think Richard Strauss is just he's the godfather of opera in this time, and it developed. And I think you cannot pick up, you cannot say that who is the best composer? Is it Bach? Is it Haydn? Is it Mozart? Is it Strauss in a way? Is it Schumann or Schubert or Brahms or Beethoven? I mean, you just can jump in any kind
Verdi, Rossini.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just mentioning the Austrian or German. But there's so many other ones. All the French composers, the British composers, they are or the American composers. Look at George
Russian composers.
Russian. By the way, to come back to the Strauss, Johann Strauss thing, did you know who was the very first conductor performing a piece of Peter Hosek Tchaikovsky in 1856? Have you heard about this? I researched it in a Russian archive. It was in Pavlovsk, and it was Johann Strauss.
Mm-hmm.
He was introduced to young composers in Russia, and one of them was Tchaikovsky. And he took the music from all these 20 or 15 or whatever students, and he thought that the piece of Tchaikovsky was the best, and he performed it in Pavlovsk in the Vauxhall, in this concert hall, this concert pavilion. So that's quite an amazing coincidence. I didn't know myself. I just found it out when I started to research for the exhibition. And I think it's quite remarkable.
And I understand that Johann Strauss went to Russia every year for many years.
10 years, correct? Yeah. I mean, he was there from 1856 to 66, I think, with 1 year he didn't go. And then he was in, or was it 1869? Anyway, he was supposed to go in 1872. He had already signed contract, but then he blew the contract and went to America instead, to New York and to Boston, which I thought was quite a big step for a guy that was scared of anything that is related with a train or with a travel or ship. He was scared. There are letters where he says that he's closing the windows, the curtains in the train because he can't see the moving landscape. And on the ship, I thought that he was super scared. But when you read all these letters or when you read whatever is, there's not much out there, unfortunately. But I told you that I wrote a book about this American trip. And this is so remarkable that he was playing cards and smoking cigars with the captain on the boat. So that was quite funny. Yeah. So
can you confirm something for me that I read about his American trip? That he had a dog, and apparently there was a tradition at the time that if you really were a fan of a musician, composer, artist, actor, your souvenir was to ask for a lock of hair from that person. But apparently either Johann Strauss did not want to give his hair or didn't have enough hair, that they kept clipping fur from the dog. Is that true?
That's what they did, but I made a research if he really had his dog with in the States. I couldn't find a scientific proof for that. I think that they either had a dog or his servant, Stefan. He was doing that because he wanted to make some extra money. So he just cut off the hair of the dog and sold it as Johann Strauss lock, which is quite, I think it's an amazing story. And also merchandise.
Must have been a very big dog.
Yeah, with a I don't know which kind of dog it was.
Newfoundland?
No, I don't think it was a Newfoundland. It was but he had a dog in Europe, but the dog was never mentioned in any of those newspaper articles that I researched in the New York Sun and in the Boston Globe and all this paperwork. That I mean, I'm registered on the New York on the newspaper archives in America to find all these things. Quite remarkable. Really interesting stuff, but nothing about the dog. So
tell us the name of your book.
Well, the book is about the trip to America. It's solely a story about his trip from Vienna all the way to Boston and back, and what he experienced there, and how did he get there? Because when I read it the first time, 50,000 people at this Jubilee Festival in Boston. This is the pop star kind of start of his career. He was the most paid artist at this festival. He got $25,000 back then. Wow. It's the equivalent of about $650,000 for 19 shows. I mean, he did 14 concerts and 3 balls, and then he did 3 extra concerts in New York. So he was the best paid artist of the time. And so how did he get there? From Vienna. So of course, you need to go to a port. So which port? Then you start researching. It was Bremerhaven, and how to get to Bremerhaven with the train. So we researched there, and then we found out who was on the train with him. And it was the Polar exhibition to the North Pole. Austrian exhibition. They were the same train. So very much likely that they maybe talked to each other. We don't know. It's no report, but they were in the same train. And then we found out who was on the boat from Bremerhaven to Southampton and Southampton to New York. I found the passenger list. I found his name in New York archives, in the passenger lists. And below him is his wife, supposedly. But the first name should have been Henriette or Yeti, but it's not. It's Katharina.
Uh-huh.
We don't know. But underneath Strauss, you have this sign that's the same name. And the age is also not right because she was 8 years older. In the paperwork, Johann Strauss was 46 and his wife was 40. Who is this woman? We don't know. In our book, we of course speculate because we go back into his wife things and Olga, his friend in Russia that he fell in love with, and he had an affair supposedly with the daughter of Josef Lanner, which was Katrina. And so we thought maybe this is kind of a clue, but wasn't. So it was his wife that did not write the correct age. That's what
He was just trying to be modest.
And we found out that the first class passengers never got checked because they had the money, tickets were paid, so they just let them through. The second and third class passenger they had checked on the immigration ports in New York. And then how to get from New York to Boston? He took the boat. He didn't take the train. He took the train back. And the train back from Boston to New York was the reason why he said, I'm never going to come back to America, because he was so scared, because they didn't have a person on the side of the road, of the railroad, waving that the track is clear. That was the reason. He said it even in an interview. So that's very, very, he was a nerd in kind of a way.
Well, two questions. Number one, what is the title of your book?
Johann Strauss' American Trip.
Okay. Second thing, was he a hypochondriac, or was he have neuroses of any kinds?
A lot. How long do we have time?
We have time.
It's a lot. No. I mean, it's a lot of neurosis. He was scared. He was a hypochondriac, definitely. After America, he came back to Europe, and he heard that in Vienna there's a rumor that there is the cholera disease. So he stayed not for 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Baden-Baden, Germany. He stayed there for 3 months and spent a lot of money there, but got a lot because the Emperor of Germany came there. So he asked him to conduct a concert, which he, of course, probably got some extra money, and he just relaxed there for 3 months. What nice. Life, huh? Yeah.
No, but I wonder how it affected his interpersonal relations. If he was hypochondriacal, if he was neurotic.
When you look at the women of his life, there was his mother, which was, of course, she was she supported his talent. She helped him through all she was the manager of the Strauss dynasty until she passed in 1870. Then shortly before that, Strauss married with Henriette, with Yeti, his first wife. She took the role of the mother because she was 8 years older. She managed him until she passed. And then he had a second wife, Lily. Lily was young, beautiful. You must imagine, I just read a book about Johann Strauss after Henriette passed. He moved out of the villa in Hitzing, which was next to Schönbrunn. He moved out immediately when she passed into a hotel where they knew that a lot of artists live. Also, his then future wife was living there. So you must imagine, his wife is dead. He doesn't even go to the funeral because he didn't went to the funeral of his mother. He didn't go to the funeral of his brother Joseph. He didn't go to the funeral of his wife. He just refused to go there. Instead, he went to the hotel and probably had a good time with the people there. And Lily was a part of him. So I don't know. Something was really weird. And the time between Olga, this was 1859, and the marriage in 1862 with Henriette, these couple years, he was in Vienna. He was known to go to places where a gentleman doesn't go usually, You understand what I mean? So he had a lot of rumors back then. There's not much left of this time, unfortunately, but it's what some people still write about it. So the third one, then Lily, the second wife, was young, and she wanted him to push her in her career as a singer, but he didn't because she wasn't good enough. That's my interpretation. And then she became into a relationship with the theater director of Theater an der Wien, Franz Steiner. So she went together with him, and Strauss. He was devastated when this happened, but immediately divorced. The problem then, he met his third wife, Adele Strauss. Was not the same family, but she was also, her surname was also Strauss, even before they got married. And then he wanted to move together with her and marry her, but he couldn't because he was divorced, and by the law and the church back then, it wasn't possible. So he decided first to convert to the Protestantism, and then become a citizen of Saxon-Coburg, which is a part of Germany. So Johann Strauss, when he passed in 1899, was a citizen of Saxon-Coburg, not of Austria anymore. Not a lot of people know that, and we don't like to talk about it either, because he was Viennese, of course.
Adela is the name of a character in Die Fledermaus. She's the maid.
Yes.
The one who puts on her mistress's dress, Rosalind's dress, and goes to the ball in the second act, given by Prince Orlovsky. Just based on our conversation of the past 40 minutes or so, I'm beginning to see or think that everything in Strauss's life experience somehow wound up in the in the operetta Die Fledermaus.
A lot of it, actually, yeah. I think so.
With the hidden wives, the masks, the going to houses of ill repute. I don't know if he wound up in prison, but the original source material was known as the Das Gefängnis, the prison, but turned slightly comical and sentimental, which is a charming thing.
Yeah, that's how I can imagine that this whole story actually happened somewhere in part of his life, or maybe in one of his friends' life. Yeah, I can imagine that for sure. Because
it's so Viennese in terms of the humor, in terms of the laughing, but at the same time being naughty, at the same time a little bit of wickedness and meanness, but at the same time, and I mean this with love, people pretending to be things they're not.
That's us Viennese. We are really good in that. There's the saying, if you're, because we are using all these titles, Hofrat and Kommerzialrat and all these kind of things, and Doctor. When you have a PhD, you are the Mr. Herr Doctor, and of course the wife of a doctor is Frau Doctor, although she has never graduated or promoted. So that's Viennese, and we say, if you're nothing, you have to make you something. Yeah, if it's a title or a business card, or when I come in Vienna to my beloved Café Schwarzenberg, I'm sure you know the coffee house.
Oh yes.
I'm not young anymore, but when 20 years ago I went there, my friends, the waiters there, they always screamed to the whole coffee house, "Grüß Gott, Herr Generaldirektor. Hello, Mr. General Director." And you come in there with your 35 years old, nothing, and you like, everybody looks at you. That's Viennese, that's, and it's funny. You have to deal with it. And it's,
but the scene at the party in which Eisenstein and I think it's Dr. Falco, I forget the other character, where they the jailer.
Oh, the Frank,
yeah, where they're talking to one another, partially in
French,
partially just trying to, be very exquisitely polite but stupid at the same time. And how funny that is, because this operetta is a mirror of Viennese-ishness, if there's such a word.
Absolutely.
And not just then, but now. That's what I love about it.
the good thing on this scene is that they both act like being a kind of chevalier
Yeah.
and a kind of blue-blooded person. They both act like that. They don't know each other. And so they start to talk in French because French was back then the language of the high society.
No.
And they start with stupid things, it's so funny. And then finally someone says something in German and the other says, well, you speak German. Yes. Yeah, me too. Let's keep talking in German then. So that's what you just mentioned, that they want to pretend to be someone else, but not necessarily being more than they are. They just want to be someone else. It's kind of a role that they play at this whole in the ball. When we go to a ball in Vienna nowadays, what do? You wear a dress that you never wear in a daily life. You wear a tailcoat or a tuxedo. And the girls wear the biggest ball gowns you can imagine. And when you are a military person, you wear your gala uniform, which you probably only wear at very special occasions. For example, like that. And when you have, how you call the kind of a military mark or a kind of
distinctives,
an orden. Then you
medals.
then the medals. Then you show your medals. And when you are from the government, you show your Austrian flag on
the red and white. Yeah,
that's what nobody would ever think of, going like this to an office. No, they just go there. Why? Because tradition, being part of this whole costuming, and it's just gorgeous. When you go to the Vienna Philharmonic Ball at Musikverein, which is, for my taste, the most elegant ball in the world. There's nothing beyond that. I don't know if you have ever been there.
I have,
You have. Now then you know what I'm talking about. This is just breathtaking. Doesn't matter if you're Viennese, American, or anywhere in the world. You're just, and it's not only the music, it's beautiful. It's just the setup, the whole setting. Everyone comes there. Everybody's dedicated to behave well, to speak well, to dress well. To dance, to have a blast until 5 o'clock in the morning. And this is something unique. There's nothing like this in the world. Yeah, maybe comparable to New York, because they have a New York Opera Ball there. Actually, I've been there a couple times.
Not much anymore at the Met. When I was performance manager, it was a big deal.
No, they have it now in the Plaza Hotel. They call it.
Yes, that's a different thing. It used to be in the Opera House at the Opera Club.
Okay, well, they should do it, because I think it would be a fantastic event.
You reminded me of my ball experience in Vienna, in that I can tell you the year 2016. After the Met, the Opera House had worked in the most as La Scala, and they do beautiful costumes at La Scala. And I was told I needed a certain kind of frack, a certain kind of formal outfit to wear when I was going to the Opera Ball in Vienna. So I went to the costume department at La Scala, and I asked them whether they could make one for me. I would pay for it, of course. And the woman, the wonderful designer there, said to me, no, we cannot do that, because Milan, we have wonderful costumes and needlework, but you need a Viennese outfit. So what she did was she measured me for every single thing that I would need for that costume, that outfit. And we sent the measurements to Vienna in metric, thank goodness, and not in inches. And it went to the appropriate person in Vienna, who created my total outfit. Wow. Everything. And because I didn't know white tie, black tie, I didn't know anything about the actual outfit. So that there are photos of me being fitted in Vienna for my outfit, and I was much heavier than I am now, and I look fat, but I look good in that costume because the tailoring was so beautiful that even though I was kind of fat then, it was beautifully done. And
the frack is the best outfit for any person, any man, anybody. If you're tall, skinny, or if you're bigger and smaller, it's the best outfit. It always looks elegant. White tie, of course, the white vest. Right. Of course, you should wear a clock, a Taschenuhr, how you call it?
A pocket watch.
pocket watch and a golden golden string or chain. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, my English is disappearing. And then of course Lackschuhe, the shiny shoes. And
Patent
then
leather shoes.
you need to know how to close the buttons with the connected with there's a very difficult connection between the vest, the shirt, and the pants, your trousers.
And I didn't know any of that, and I had to be taught everything in Vienna.
Believe me, a lot of people me included, didn't know anything about that. But when you do it the correct way, it's the best dress you can wear in the world. It's the best.
And I mention all this because all of this, in a way, has a springboard in the music of Johann Strauss and the other composers, that this whole tradition that continues to this day. We're coming in on 200 years of his birth, but let's say 180, 160 years of activity, despite world wars, despite the fall of an empire, despite everything, remarkably, it continues.
I have to tell you an interesting story because you mentioned the world wars. Have you known that Johann Strauss was the eighth Jew by birth? And during the Second World War,
they paternal grandfather or great grandfather.
It was the father's side. It was
paternal.
And the Nazis, as you know, they always had gave trouble to people that had Jewish ancestors.
No sense of humor.
Goebbels himself, he wrote to Vienna and said, "What is going on there with this Strauss guy? We cannot make him as a forbidden music because he's an eighth Jew. We sent me the birth book. They sent the birth book from St. Stephan, from our cathedral, to Berlin, and they falsified this one page completely. I get goosebumps all the time when I hear that. Arisiert is the German word. They made him an Arya.
Yeah.
Because they said
they Aryanized him.
Aryanized him. And it's part of our exhibition because I found the original and the copy. So we are going to put it in our exhibition because I think it's very important to know what even the Nazis couldn't go around this superstar. And this is so remarkable. I mean, we don't talk about the Nazi topic because it's terrible. But in this case, I think it's important to show people that he was Aryanized by the Nazis, and I think a lot of people don't know these stories. I didn't know when I started researching many years ago. I mostly concentrated on the work and the life, but then when you go after his death and you find out what happened all these years between his death and today, you find out a lot of interesting stories that are quite remarkable and that a lot of people don't know. And it's still important to understand what is Johann Strauss about. Another story, sorry to tell you all these stories because I found out my grandmother, she was born in 1900 and she passed in 1809. And she told me this story all the time that when the Russians left Austria in 1955 as the last Allied forces to give Austria the freedom, in 55, they made a big parade. Actually, this Café Schwarzenberg we talked about before.
Yeah, sure.
On the other side is the Schwarzenberg Platz with this big Russian monument which they built, and it's still there. And in front there was the parade. And of course, the Russian army came there with the soldiers and the army band, and they played, of course, the Russian anthem. Austrians came with their parade, with their soldiers, with their army band. But what did they play? There was no Austrian anthem because the Austrian anthem was the German, now German anthem, which was the Nazi anthem, and before it was the Emperor's anthem. They couldn't play that. So what did they play? They played the Blue Danube Waltz. just to say goodbye to the Russians. That's why we call the Plotkin Waltz the unofficial anthem of our country,
Yeah.
because of maybe this story. And I mean, there's many other stories about his music, but this is a quite interesting one as well, I think.
We earlier began to talk about politics, and I said, let's wait, but let's cover it now. In most of Europe in the 1840s, leading up to 1848, there was revolution and turmoil and the desire for change. Certainly in Italy, they wanted to throw out the Austrian occupiers in northern Italy. In France and Germany, certainly Wagner in Dresden participated in the riots, and he had to go take refuge in Switzerland. And this fervor also came to Austria against certain people, against the Habsburg rulers and empires.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you began to say that the father Strauss was politically one way and the son Strauss the other way.
Correct. The father was he was more waiting. He was not active supporting the emperor's regime, but he was waiting. He was not active. But Johann Strauss, and especially his brother Joseph Strauss, he was actually he had a gun, and he was probably fighting. But Johann himself, he was a coward. Basically, there's a letter where they write about him wearing the gun, and then he heard shootings miles away. He put the gun against the wall and went home to his mother because he got scared. This is the story. But the interesting thing is, before he even came to the year of 1848, he's one of his trips to Romania, Valahai, back then. He went all the way to Bucharest. With the carriages, which is amazing. And then there, the revolution started, and he tried with a uniform, because he had a uniform. He tried to get to arrest the Austrian ambassador in Bucharest with a kind of an operetta kind of setup. Of course, he was nobody, because everybody said, "Who is this person?" Nobody knew him, but he wanted to be more than he is. Again, very Viennese. And then they reported his actions to Vienna. And then when he came back in the early 1848 years, he was then coming into the revolution in Vienna. And he wrote the Revolutionary March, and he played the Marseillaise. He got arrested. He had to give. There's a protocol where he explained why he played the Marseillaise. He just said because they asked for it, and he was scared that they were going to hit him if he's not playing it, so he played it. We don't really know. Is it just a protection thing that he doesn't want to go to jail, or is it really that story? We don't really know. But I think he was very much in connection with the revolutionary movement, which made him a lot of trouble in the after that, because of course the revolution got knocked down, and the regime was quite strict with all the revolutionaries. Metternich was back for a short time, and then he left too. So I think that he suffered for almost 15 years, 16 years until he got acknowledged again from the emperor. But a lot of things changed then. So yeah, I think he was a revolutionary, I would say.
Your explanation prompts something in my head that I've thought about for many decades without always exploring it, but I'm going to explore it a bit with you. As I said, my perspective comes mostly from Italy. I lived in northern Italy. I worked there, worked in opera there, but also worked in opera a lot in Austria and to some degree in France. And these two countries, Austria and France, were nearby. They in the 19th century were either empires or large whole nations, whereas Italy was broken up into many pieces. And so many Italians went either to Vienna or to Paris to seek their fortune in music or many other careers, visual arts certainly. And so I've always conceived of Paris and Vienna as being two very similar cities, but rivals, not the way New York and Vienna might be. We're not rivals. We look at one another for inspiration. And try to be a little better, but not rival. But Paris and Vienna were very much rivals. And I remember someone said to me many years ago that Vienna is Paris without the French, to which a French person said, yes, and Paris is Vienna without the Viennese. And you can say that the two cities, with their magnificent opera houses and orchestras and art collections and cake, wonderful pastries, I will say definitively the coffee is much better in Vienna than in Paris. For everything else, we can talk, but the coffee in Vienna is much better. Um, but nonetheless, in the musical world, we have Jacques Offenbach and we have Johann Strauss Jr., the second, the son. And they both wrote operettas that addressed the concerns, the humor, the politics of their own societies. And when we in New York do Die Fledermaus or Les Contes d'Hoffmann or other works, La Petite works by Offenbach, I don't think we quite communicate the humor from the stage. I don't think the audiences quite understand the humor, the cultural context, even if they're done in the original language. I just think, again, that these cities and their humor and their aesthetics are very unique to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you can compare them, but you can't necessarily reproduce them. What do you think?
I think Jacques Offenbach was before Strauss writing over all these operettas, and of course the taste of the people in France, especially in Paris, was different than in Vienna. When it came to the fashion, I think it was very much Paris, also in Vienna in the fashion. But when it came to power, of course, Austrian and Hungarian Empire, very powerful. French Empire, very powerful. And it's no coincidence that the first world exhibition was in Paris and not in Vienna. But it was also no coincidence that Vienna, right after that, said, okay, we want to do that as well, because we are also important. Maybe not as big and as important like Paris at that time, but of course powerful enough to make an exhibition. And that's why in 1867, the World Exhibition in Paris was such a big thing. And of course, the son of Metternich actually was the ambassador in France. And he invited Strauss, actually his wife, Pauline, invited Strauss to come to Paris to perform at the Austrian embassy and to perform in Paris in general for the emperor. He performed there for Napoleon III. And so this is something that showed me there is no evidence that Jacques Offenbach performed there at this time. So the taste of the pieces of the Offenbach operettas, besides the music, it's great, it's fantastic music. Mm-hmm. But I think it makes a big difference when you have Alexander Girardi as a main actor for the operettas of Strauss, which didn't exist at this extent in Paris. So it depends on the person to present it, because I'm sure that Alexander Girardi and also Richard Genet, the co-writer of the Fledermaus, they gave Johann Strauss a lot of input about how the audience works, how the story should work, how please write a piece of music just for my character. And mm-hmm. Alexander Girardi was a character. He was the most famous actor back then on all the stages. People loved him. Mm-hmm. Of course, this extended the identity of an operetta, of a Viennese operetta by Johann Strauss with the audience, because they loved him. In Paris, I don't know much about the audiences there at this time, but I think it was a little bit more reserved. It was a little bit, of course, Paris was always a super elegant city, and especially in these times and now too. I can't explain why the music of the pieces of Jacques Offenbach. I played myself as a musician, and when you play as a musician, as a clarinet player, when you play Offenbach, you know what you play? The whole for 2 and 3 hours. You know, that's what you do. There's not one melody. There's all melodies either on the singer's side or the violins, but the wind's always playing And this is what you see when you're a musician. I'm sorry to say that. It's still beautiful music. Or look at the Barcarolle, which is probably one of the most famous pieces by Offenbach.
Yeah.
Plum, 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 plum. And you play this for minutes. Yeah. Only this rhythm. Beautiful music. Beautiful song. Very, very, but for a musician to perform it, it's a little bit boring. For me as a musician, not when you're in the audience. When you're in the audience, you see the whole picture. Depends, of course, on the director. And I'm not a big fan of the modern theater interpretations. I'm more a classic guy, purist. But this is a taste thing anyway. But when I sit in the audience and I see a beautiful old style operetta by Offenbach, it's beautiful. It's just the stories that he tells. He has good scripts, very good scripts, much better ones than Johann Strauss he wrote 16 operettas. And how many books are really, really good, except the Fledermaus, of course, Zigeuner Baron, the Gypsy Baron, very good book. Der Spitzentuch der Königin, I think it's a very good book. Not Simplicius is a bad book. The other one. Sorry, I just read the book. It was quite good. I forgot about it. Not Simplicius, it was the other one. Anyway, it will cross my mind. So I think that Jacques Offenbach had a big advantage with the stories, so with the libretti, and Johann Strauss was in favor with the music, because his music doesn't matter if you have a text or a singer or whatever. It's always good. It's always great music when it comes to an operetta.
But I'm going to go back to my question. Do you think that people in Vienna and Paris understand the humor and the sentimentality in the other nations' work? Not to mention, I mean, I think the British, who are wonderful in the theater, don't always understand how to do either Offenbach or Johann Strauss. And Americans don't either. But
a problem is the language. I think when you have good translations, I think it could work. But can you imagine a Fledermaus in French? I can't. But
I've seen it, Le Chauve-souris. I've seen it.
Yeah, but I can't imagine. I've never seen. I've seen it in Hungarian, in Budapest, which was really funny because you don't understand anything. You can't even get the clue. If you don't know the story, you're lost. But it was a good production. But I've seen the Fledermaus in English. Works okay, but still, all this humor of the words and of the agogic of the ductus is not. It's just in German, because then the joke really works. You have to really work around the joke, because some words just don't function in English or in other languages. But I think they understand the humor. I mean, it depends which level of people you're asking. If you ask the masses, they probably ask who. And when you say Offenbach or even Strauss, Strauss probably they know because of the Thank God New Year's concert of the Wiener Philharmonic, which is famous everywhere. But when you talk about Offenbach, you have to have educated, knowledgeable people that know about music history. They probably won't like operettas or like Offenbach per se, but they know about him. And this is always the question where you're positioning yourself, because we are talking on an extremely high intellectual, knowledgeable level. So, of course, we both can probably go down a couple levels and bring it to a level where everybody can follow. But I love this intellectual approach and the intellectual exchange, which is making my day, probably my whole month now, talking to you, because this is something that I don't do very often.
Yeah. So now I specifically want to talk about you and your activities. What is coming in the year to come in terms, you're talking about museum exhibitions in your book and Schönbrunn concerts and so on. Just give me an outline of what people visiting Vienna and not only should be expecting in the year to come, and how many of these things you're involved in.
Well, first of all, it starts on the 1st of January at midnight, the celebrations of the Johann Strauss Jubilee year. There's their own company formed by the city of Vienna. They gave some budget for this anniversary year. which is quite remarkable. And I know the person, it's Mr. Roland Geier, Professor Geier. He was the boss of the Theater an der Wien many years. And they asked him after his retirement, they asked him if he can be head of this Jubilee year. And I'm in contact with him in other projects, and he's a fantastic guy. He's doing in the artistic part. So he says he wants every week he wants a new premiere. So that's a big approach and a big challenge to do that. And he's more trying to connect modern ways of presentation of this kind of music with the traditional one. He covers everything. I mean, from the Philharmonic concert with I think Telemann, all the way to DJs and electronic music that also changed the music of Johann Strauss into this kind of rhythm. And he's doing stage productions and operettas and all these kind of things. I'm involved because the city of Vienna, he himself decided not to do an exhibition. And I think it's important to have an exhibition about Johann Strauss in the city of Vienna because there is none. There is simply no exhibition. There is nothing. There's not even a museum, nothing. So I said, okay, I'm not only doing it for the Strauss anniversary. I want to do it forever. So I want to install something, but I don't want to do it the way that everybody's doing, because when you can put a piece of paper, a letter, an original letter, you can put there, but it's written in current. It's written in German, current. So for me, even it's hard to even encipher it. My mom can still read it, and she's 83 years. But a lot of my generation can't read it anymore. So why having an original letter that nobody can read? You have to explain it again. So I said, let's digitalize it. Let's make it into a digital exhibition and invent a new art of a new form of exhibition art. That's the approach. And being the first one in the world that is doing it in a musical exhibition topic. There's nothing existing like that worldwide. So I'm quite proud of the idea. Then I said, okay, how to do that? I need money. So, okay, I have not enough money, so I have to take a loan. So I took a loan. I put some people together, and now we're producing it together. And this exhibition is going to open, like I mentioned, in a couple of weeks, and will be seven acts, 7 movements. First to 6th will be about the objective life of Johann Strauss. So where is he coming from? His family, the rivalry with his father, of course, the revolution topic that we're talking about, the Russian 10 years in Russia, which are quite important, the love affair with his Olga, with his first and probably only real love. And then, of course, the international success and his women in his life, and then all the stage work, all the way to his death. And this will all be installations, digitalized. You must imagine it's a lot of projections. We have 25 screens and 26 beamers. So the whole thing will be a very immersive experience. With a headphone that you have to wear, and you have a geo tracker on top, so the headphone always knows where you are and automatically plays what you see, the information about whatever you see. And this makes the whole thing very, very easy to handle. And you are in your tunnel with the beautiful music. We have really high level Sennheiser headphones. Yeah. We have a very good recording. I licensed the recordings of the Johann Strauss recording of Naxos that are 52 CDs that they brought out, all the works of Johann Strauss with and without the opus, and also the operettas, everything. And we recorded our own pieces of music, which will be in the movement 7, which is a big room, about 250 square meters, about high walls, and we project into this room the subjective view of Johann Strauss on his own work. So this, we call it the new dimensions, because all the exhibition is called Johann Strauss New Dimensions. We want to give the people a new dimension of Johann Strauss, because if you go out on the street to people that are not that educated and ask about Johann Strauss, tell me what he wrote, then you probably hear two words. You hear the Blue Danube Waltz and you hear the Radetzky March. And bam, it's wrong because it was written by the father. So, so this is something that we want to make them aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you can spend 15, 20 minutes in the exhibition, or you can spend an hour and a half. So it depends what you are interested in.
And where is this exhibition? Where exactly in Vienna?
Exhibition, yeah, we found a fantastic location. Exhibition is, you mentioned the market, the Nash market.
Yeah.
It's at the very beginning of Nash Market. It's a freestanding building in the center of the city where everybody crosses with the streets. It was the former Austrian Verkehrsbüro, Österreichisches Verkehrsbüro, which is on the opposite side of the secession, of the secession.
The Verkehrsbüro is a workers' like fund, like credit union?
No, the Verkehrsbüro was a travel agency.
Traveling,
where all the carriages, and then later on the first buses went from there to the countrysides, and it's in the center. And do you know the Secession with the golden? It's right opposite of that.
Okay,
it's right opposite of that. It's like 5 minutes walk from the Opera House. It's right
and Thatcher under Wien is nearby.
It's right next across the street.
And the man from whom I buy vinegar.
yes, my friend. I'm Nashma. Do you know him? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Best vinegar in the world.
He has also everything. He has
pumpkin oil, all right there. So, and in terms of annual concerts at Schönbrunn Palace, yes. I know it's a summer thing. You explained why at the beginning of our conversation.
Actually, we perform every day.
So then that was
and we parallel to that, we tour throughout the world. I announced the world tour, which is what is the world when you tour? So we tour in January. We are in China and in Scandinavia. In February, we are supposed to go to Saudi Arabia. I'm always making a question mark there because I only believe it when I'm there. In March, we have Australia and New Zealand. In April, we are doing a Fledermaus semi-stage production in Greece, which is nice. In May, we are going to Asia. We are going to perform at the expo in Osaka because we want to keep the tradition that Johann Strauss music is performed at the expos, and the festival in Japan. And then June, I think we take it a little bit easy because in summer we are going to play at the festivals everywhere in Europe. And then let's see what happens in September. We have some plans there, but I need to do something in the United States because I always wanted to do something in New York. I actually talked to the what's the name of the theater again? It's off Broadway. It's a beautiful theater in Art Deco style. The city center.
City Center, yeah, on 55th Street, yeah.
Exactly. I wanted to do a Fledermaus production there.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I need to find the Frosch. And my idea was to have a Frosch being a celebrity, like a Hollywood star. And of course, who crosses your mind when you talk about superstars from the movie scene playing the Frosch? So many names cross your mind.
Well, if you were not so old, I would have Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks would be amazing. Yeah. But I was thinking about John Malkovich or Bill Murray.
Bill Murray.
But they also don't really know.
Let's tell listeners, just in case they don't know who Frosch is, if you know Richard Strauss, he wrote the opera Die Frau ohne Schatten, the woman without a shadow, and we in opera call it Frosch, Frau ohne Schatten. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No, really.
We all call it Frosch.
Oh, really?
We do Frosch from Richard Strauss or Fledermaus from Johann Strauss. But who you tell us? I know who it is. Who is the famous?
The Frosch is the jailer in the operetta.
Third act.
It's only the third act, but my concept in this case would be to make the Frosch, the actor, it's only a speaking role, it's not a singing role, only a speaking role, into a main actor explaining, starting in the Act 1, after the overture, coming out and says, it's the time is Monday morning. So you have Saturday evening, you have the ball at Orlovsky. Monday morning, you have the headache in the prison. And this scene, he comes out this Monday morning and he says, oh my God, you can't imagine what just happened to me last weekend. And then he tells, like a narrator, he tells the audience what happened. And then you make the backflashes. And you can always stop the scene, because in this case, you can make it in German, original language, speaking and singing, because you have a narrator in the local language. This is the concept we're doing in Greece, and in Bulgaria, we got a request to do it there with a local comedian that everybody knows locally, which sells the
And
ticket.
will you get Bulgarian slivovitz, which is essential to
Of course, I mean, we already this is something we already have. We perform in
being a plum brandy that the character consumes in great quantity.
You just find a local schnapps. You find anything local, and in Greece it will be probably the Uso or the Metaxa. So it can be anything, yeah.
But the thing is that often the character of Frosch deals with contemporary issues, deals with politics and so on, usually in sort of a bipartisan way. So that in America, we would have coverage of Trump and Biden, both of them, by Frosch, and making jokes about both of them being old or whatever jokes they would be, rather than just Trump or just Biden. And but when I worked on, we had a beautiful production at the Met in the 1980s by Otto Schenk, who did it in Vienna. Kiri Takano was Rosalinda, and Håkan Håkegard was Eisenstein, who was a great cast. And we had various jailers, starting with Otto Schenk himself.
Yeah, I can remember.
But the audience didn't quite understand his sense of humor. We then had Sid Caesar, who was a very famous American television comedian, very, very, very famous. Mel Brooks was the writer for Sid Caesar.
Oh, really?
In the 1950s, Sid Caesar was very, very famous, and but he was a very serious comedian. He was not someone who was funny all the time. He knew how to be funny on stage, and he was very nervous. And I remember that I had to relax him a lot about how to be funny on stage at the Metropolitan Opera. But people loved him because he was Sid Caesar. We had Dom DeLuise being a funny, brash Italian-American actor who was in Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles. It's kind of like, if you were in a Mel Brooks movie, then you could play Frosch in New York. But it does have to be someone who is, I think Bill Murray would be a good choice, because you can believe him drunk, you can believe him making commentary.
Just very difficult to get a hold of him, because I have no contact. I don't know anyone that.
Well, he famously is hard to get a hold of.
Okay.
I mean, of all the actors and performers, he's the one who's the most difficult to get a hold of. But I think an interesting one might be the actor Steve Carell.
Steve Carell, I like him. Yeah,
he's funny. I think because
the elf, right? He played the elf.
Yeah. I think. But he was in The Office, and he was the 40-year-old virgin, and he recently did, of all things, Uncle Vanya in New York, and he can play comedy, he can play drama.
I even thought about Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's not. See, this is exactly the reaction that everybody says, because it's so out of this world asking him. But if I get a chance to ask Arnold, I would immediately ask him, because I think he could make it in his own style very funny. Yeah. Very funny.
He would be very, very funny. In fact, you are right.
Super funny.
And also in that same vein, get Danny DeVito.
Getting both.
Because Danny DeVito is very funny on the stage. I saw him recently in a play in New York. He's a wonderful stage actor and very funny. And they make an unusual team. There we go. But I think I agree with you. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is even better choice than Bill Murray.
I think so. But the problem, of course, I mean, the whole thing is built after the star. And then you have to go with the star. The problem is I have now so many projects to deal with with the exhibition and with all the other tours, that something like this needs a special attention, because
Yeah.
you cannot get a superstar and then not care about it. It's not good. So I'm probably postponing this idea for. Well, there's not another Jubilee in my lifetime, but
you don't have to do a Jubilee. I mean, Fledermaus is an evergreen. It's a perennial. And
yes,
I think that, if you were to get an Arnold Schwarzenegger or any number of other performers that we've mentioned, or even a woman, could be very, very interesting. It
you
does
have a
not have to
woman
be a man.
Roche now in the Volksopera.
And she would be a Frausch.
I think she calls herself Frosch. I think I've not seen the production yet.
But not Frausch because she's a woman.
No, I don't think so. But it would be funny. No, but I think I liked it. Like I mentioned before, I'm more the traditional person. So
Yeah.
interpreting, it's not a woman's role. It's like the Eisenstein cannot be a woman or a transgender or a.
But Orlovsky, who is the prince, the bored Russian prince who throws the party in Act Two, has been played by mezzo sopranos, has been played by countertenors, occasionally by tenors.
Or by bases like Ivan Reprov. I don't know if you know the name.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. And he did it. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he made it over. There's a recording where he made it. I think a production recording where he made with his. He had like 7 octaves, like very deep and very high, and this was one of those songs that he made in this scene in the second act of the Fledermaus.
A very wonderful Orlovsky was the American mezzo-soprano, mostly mezzo-soprano, Regina Resnick, who was a friend of mine, and she was a New Yorker, but her German was so good that she played it in Vienna for Herbert von Karajan.
Wow.
Do you know that recording?
No.
Okay, you want to find it about 1960, 1961. Yeah.
Never heard of a recording of Karajan.
Really?
I only know that. I'm not so much into the opera things, but operetta I am. But I listened to his operetta, to his Fledermaus Overture from the New Year's concert in '87, which was phenomenal. The whole concert was just wow.
No, this would be about 1960, and it had a nice Austrian cast, plus guests such as Birgit Nilsson, Leontine Price. Because in Act Two, there's the party scene. You have guests come in who sing novelty numbers, and you had Leontine Price and Giulietta Simeonato and Birgit Nilsson and Renata Tebaldi, all these wonderful artists, all on the Herbert von Karajan production. It's worth hearing. I'm sure we have it on Idacho.
I have to look it up on your database. Yeah, very interesting.
So I hope that, Peter, in our conversation, we have not only inspired but educated audiences around the world to really revisit their notion of Johann Strauss, the son, and how he represents not only the world of his time and place, but also how much he connects to who we are today, and not just in Vienna, but anywhere in the world, and human behavior and the love of Gemütlichkeit, the love of a lighthearted spirit when we need that in a world that is so full of challenges and heavy problems everywhere in the world, unfortunately, that I think we're ready for a year of Johann Strauss Jr., don't you?
Absolutely. And, I have to finally tell you the story that connects me with Johann Strauss, or with the slogan of Johann Strauss, because you always want to, in the end of a conversation, you want to keep something that everybody remembers. And I was 30 years ago, I had friends over from Australia, and I was a young entrepreneur. We were sitting at the Heurigen, the wine places in Vienna, having good wine. And it was quite late. I was tired. I had to get up the next morning. And I said to my friends, come on, guys, let's go home. I'm tired. We need to go sleep. And then my friend from Australia said, come on, Peter, don't get stressed. And then I said, get Straussed. and that's my slogan since then. Don't get stressed, get Straussed. And I think it says everything
Yeah,
because it's relaxing. It's not too thoughtful like a opera by Richard Strauss or even Richard Wagner, or even Mozart can be thoughtful. It's
very.
easy. It's easy. Everything is easy to understand. It's like you said. It's a little naughty, but it's still beautiful to listen to. It's very elegant when you play it elegantly. It's very elegant when you move them with the music, and that's just a very unique thing that no other composer in the world ever covered in this combination. And so I admire him. I
So at the
really.
Heurigen, so do I, and so I admire you actually for having this passion. At the Heurigen, they often drink Gruner Veltliner is sort of the famous Austrian white wine. However, they also drink something called Gemischter Satz, which
I
is
just wanted
the
to mention, yeah.
white wine that sort of comes every year based on what was good in the harvest that year. It's a blend of many grapes. It's not just Gruner Veltliner.
That's
And
very correct.
Gemischter Satz is about, to me, uh, enjoying the moment. It's about the things change, things evolve, but you still have the spirit of what it means to be Viennese, what it means to be living in the moment and living well and living for today and enjoying today. And that very much is to me the music of not Richard, Johann Strauss II, and therefore Gemischter Satz.
Thank you so much, Fred. This was a very nice saying, to live in the moment. When you go back the 180 years when the balls happened in Vienna, what did the people do? At the time was not easy. It was post-revolution, pre-war. After the Vienna Congress, people wanted to get into a lifestyle, and they wanted to get rid of all the thoughts and all the heavy thoughts that they have or had, and so they went to the ballrooms, and they
Yep.
got a lot of we saw a lot of newspaper reports about worried parents about their daughters, that they lose their daughters because they're passing out because of dancing too much and getting in a bad shape because they want to have this love was like an addiction to go
Yep.
there every weekend. And the officers of the military, they took off their jackets and their uniforms, went into the civil dress into the balls outside of the city center to find this entertainment, this enjoyment, find the beautiful girls, the Wäschemädel, the washing ladies, they were dressed up and having a ball. And that's why probably the phrase comes from having a ball.
Yep.
And the officers, of course, they liked it too, especially next to the Palace of Schönbrunn, the summer palace where we have our concerts. Also, it's right next door where Johann Strauss had his very first concert. The
Yeah.
place doesn't exist anymore, but we know where it was basically set up, and I think they're living in the moment and don't get stressed and get Straussed. I think that's a very nice thing. Live in the moment. I like that.
Peter Hosek, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
No, my pleasure at any time, and hope to see you soon in person.
Absolutely.